Anna, you're still on mute.
Thank you.
Yes, good. I can hear you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
I'm not finished listening to that book that you recommended, though.
Is it an audio?
Yes, I bought the audiobook.
Wow, I didn't realize it was an audio. Is it interesting?
Mm-hmm. Hey, Glenn.
Hi, Glenn. The guy is a magician. Is that the one?
I noticed that. Yeah, he does sleight of hand, and he was talking about how he deals with indigenous peoples and how they believe he has power, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting book.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Glenn, how goes?
Hey there, I'm good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Are we the first guests of today?
Yes. We are all our own guests.
That's good.
We're all each other's guests.
Yeah.
I also got a inquiry from Heiner, so I believe Heiner will be joining us.
That's good. Heiner Banking. He lives in Germany, doesn't he?
I believe so.
Yeah.
And actually, before we get started, Anna, how's Daniel doing? Haven't heard from him for quite a while.
That's interesting. I just rang him by mistake, but I didn't get any reply. So I don't know how he's doing. I haven't seen him for a while either. I don't even know where he is. Could be anywhere.
I thought it was London somewhere. Is it not London somewhere?
Where he is at the moment?
Yeah.
Don't know.
Okay. Well, let's see. It's already 5 after. How are we all?
Shall we do a round? Yeah. Okay, I'll begin. Tomorrow I'm going down to stay with my sister for a funeral that is happening for a cousin of mine who died last week. She was almost 90 and just didn't make it. December would have been her 90th birthday. And it's been interesting for me how that has stirred things up for me about funerals, about death, about family, relationships, and yeah, how important family is to me or how unimportant it is to me. I really don't know. I don't usually go to funerals, but I'm going to this one because it's likely that after this, the next people online on the list, so to speak, are my sister and myself. So there won't be a sort of family get together until it gets to us, if it's a funeral. So I think that's why I'm going, because it's, yeah, we're next on the list. It's a funny feeling. Otherwise, I'm fine. Okay, that's me.
Were you and your cousin close, Anna?
We were closer when I was younger. I think she looked after, because she's quite a bit older, almost 10 years older than I was. So she I think was around our house quite a bit, looked after us, and yeah. So yeah, there was definitely an attachment. I think we looked similar.
Well, that might be a threading theme right now because I've had my mom here for about 5 or 6 days. She's here through tomorrow. My mother is 85, and she's always been very outgoing, very engaging, makes friends easily, has a good sense of humor. But lately has been much more self-deprecating because she's kind of making fun of her own impending Alzheimer's because I guess her sister or cousin died of Alzheimer's, when they went. So she has some kind of a family. There's 1 or 2 people in her family that have had Alzheimer's. And so it was really nice because in this particular week, she was here since Tuesday. My brother from Washington, D.C. also took the opportunity to come out and visit me. So he's been here and is leaving today. So it's been a nice mini reunion with my mom and my brother. And of course, my daughter, Veronica, is here. And my other daughter, Amy, is in Seattle, which is only 75 minutes away. So we spent the evening together with her. But yeah, my mother's 85, and she's talking about what to do next. And in fact, even wants to check herself into a nursing home. I'm surprised. She didn't want to come move in with me, which I offered. My dad did move in with me, but then moved out very quickly thereafter because he didn't like it here. So they're going to live together in Hawaii, and hopefully that'll go well. So anyway, that's a little bit a slice of what's been going on. And yeah, so I'm basically doing a lot of family things this week and not had a lot of time to finish up writing or listening or reading a lot of other materials. So that's my check-in for now. Thanks.
Was that a picture of you and your mom that you put on Facebook?
Yeah, it was my mother, me, and my brother, I think. I did post that one, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a reasonably good cook. He works for the Congressional Research Service, so doing directed research in healthcare policy for Congress. So he actually works for Congress. But he also is a very good cook, so he did most of the cooking this week. Thanks. Wie geht's, Heiner?
Es geht gut. Und dir?
Ausgezeichnet, ja.
Ja, aber sag mal, sind wir alleine oder wer ist da?
Anyway, we're just checking in, Heiner. Anna checked in, I checked in. So I guess Glenn or Heiner, you guys are up, if you'd like.
Yeah, well, I'm just having a quiet day today, so I just slept a long time. I live here at Nesodden with my girlfriend, and we have a little cat, and so I just listened to one of the talks between Tammy and Fabian and Doug. And that was quite very interesting. Yeah, very peaceful day, really. So looking forward to it. Yeah. So that's it for me now.
Thanks, Glenn. Banking?
Das ist Heiner. This is Heiner. I'm just coming with the overnight bus from Bonn, from the United Nations Climate Negotiation. And it was nearly like 22/7. It was really, really exhausting. I've been part of such circus the last 20 and even more years. But this was such strong energy and so much political theater and drama that I'm feeling totally broken. We have done some video production and film production on planet Earth and mental mobility. And as this was a very large estate with the internal and external negotiations and the pavilions, only the day before the last day, I got finally a bike, so to really make the distances. So I was all the time a hybrid between a donkey and a camel. No, maybe also chameleon, as I like it, changing colors and having technology and being smart. But I don't know the word for hybrid when it is out of three identities or element. Sam, can you help me? What is a hybrid with three elements?
I actually don't know the biological term for that. I don't know. Maybe you're a GMO.
Turbulence is really good for the balance. And the balance in time is something the humans create, and it's not part of this antagonistic concepts of life.
So Heino, would you like to give us a little snapshot of what was happening at the
Nothing happened.
Really?
Nothing happened. Business as usual. You see, we had this crazy fights of in-group, out-group. Are the Americans in or out? And there were one big pavilion on innovation and sustainability and entrepreneurship, where the Americans, which are still in, I mean, the top governors of California, Oregon, Massachusetts, have been there with their teams. So I did their magic roundtables with young people. Otherwise, there were two big places. One was semi-public. It was called Bond Zone. You had to register already in September. And the other was totally, how do you say, veiled. Communities with walls. What is this word in English? Gated communities where all the public, the secret or internal negotiations took. But it was like in Paris. It is not binding. So they do talk to each other, learn from each other, share intentions, and prepare papers, which are the lowest common denominator, so everybody can agree, and then hop on and wait for next year in Poland to have the next conference of the party. So the party is called COP, Conference of the Parties, but I say it should be also of the people and the planet, and not just for the heads of states and delegations. A lot of demos outside, a lot of internal talks. So it is always that the Sherpas meet in the last day in the Marriott Hotel. So you are really getting drunk in many of the side events and on the 17th floor with the big potatoes. I'm more with the people, bottom up. We had a Earth pavilion, and we did some shooting, film shooting, and my colleague also made a presentation. All these are little video clips, and we are in production. But what do you want to hear? Do you have a special interest?
Well, more or less what you've said, I guess, just the feeling of whether anything was accomplished, or, you know, what were the main sort of issues that were being discussed.
And I'm interested in what's holding people back from real collaboration.
Well, you see, it was under the umbrella of the Fiji. And I was last night with this president and the minister and his team. They really have the urgency. They created the Talaoma space, where it is really in the traditional way what I write in my papers on sharing and gifting and friendliness. And they cannot do it here. People don't have time, don't listen to each other, don't confront each other. The people sit in rows looking to the panel. So it's dualistic. It is ego. Well, this is what I tell since all the time. We have not in political agendas any means to really subsume and resonate. And if you go to these negotiations, I was not party or party overflow or observer, whatever the ranks and hierarchies are in such gated communities of negotiations. It is that elements have to be brought together. They call it bracketing. And well, actually, this is hyper-EBIS developed with Kunz and Rittel in Berkeley, all these negotiations. All this means not just talk or listen, but really how to come to common grounds, to understanding, to deeper meaning, influences, and not just like a roaster on a pile of chicken is trying to put his thing into the center.
So it sounds from what you're saying that it's a difficulty in people's personalities rather than, I guess what I would have assumed was a real unwillingness to actually put any limit on their economic output.
Sure, it is always the position and the perspective and ambitions and assumptions and expectations, but it is not so simple. You see, all this communication goes via shared images, metaphors, narratives, and they are in context when you live, for example, on an island or in a valley. But if now we have what I wrote and shared with this John Gebser, that we have the impact that we share with people with whom we don't have commons. We don't have common meanings. We have words and jargon out of context. Then it's through the cultural differences also very, very difficult. And that's why we have to come to other forms, going beyond the need to agree, just being present, just do the meditation and presence. And well, I don't know where to end up with your question. It's my lifetime's ordeal since 40 years.
Is it a meeting of international entities, or is it a? I was wondering, do people think that they're representing international entities, or do people really come up and represent themselves with their full self? Or are they just playing a role for some organization they may or may not be completely aligned with? Which is politics.
Well, it's a COP. It's a conference of the parties. And the parties are the nations. And this time, they vote in side events down to the regions. But this is actually what it is about.
Is there anyone there that might be receptive to what we are doing here, or is it just completely alien and foreign to them?
I think we lost. Oh, here he is.
Heiner's back. You're on mute, Heiner. I'm going to unmute you. There, you're unmuted. Did you hear my question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that is a problem of identity, position, realm, or frames of references, that this is all vague, and the parties are delegations. But it was found out with this blaming and shaming that the children didn't save the planet, the business and the foundations and the academia. Nobody was saving the planet, and that we have to come to other formats, that we are crossing scales, that even the nations have to talk to their regions, as we have just found out in the issue of Barcelona and Madrid. So it is all about lumping and splittering and fighting and elbowing. And so when the original, how do you say, intention, I wouldn't say goals, they speak about the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, when they are not clear and when they are in opposition from each other. So you cannot go at the same time in three directions to follow three goals. You have to look what you do first and go to the root causes to goals which help other goals to be achieved. So the whole framework is so central, and what they're doing, they're just doing nominalistic numbers, indicators juggling. So they agree in these negotiations, we want to reduce by 2%, but they are like charlatans, like contrarians or alarmists, are just doing this blaming and shaming and making sure that their government can shine. And then again, their government is not again one person. It is many ministries which are fighting against each other, who have their own interest. One is in development, the other is in culture, the other is in internal or industry. So these are really challenging tasks for what you want to achieve, Sam.
May I ask one more question? Is there anyone in that community who's really thinking and communicating systemically, drawing, those subsystems, larger systems, influences, interactions, flows, transformations, tendencies, indicators, trends? Is there someone actually there thinking systemically, or is it all, I see this data point, therefore this action is required. I see this data point, therefore this action is required. It's all piecemeal, disjoint, simplified. That's what I see when people that are well-meaning, who are well-meaning, get together and try to do things, is they see a small thing, they do a small thing, and they wonder why people don't support them without anyone, and I'm guilty of this myself, okay? So I'm not trying to blame anyone, without anyone actually having an interest, or at least, an appreciation for just putting together the larger picture and how these things might influence and interact.
Well, on the nation level, these representatives of the government, certain ministers, or the negotiators, or the teams, they are there because their job asks them to do it. So they sit around, and there's a high rotation. So when you come to a COP like 2009 in Copenhagen, which was also like so dramatic as this week and last week, or 1995, the first COP in Berlin, where the Americans also rocked the boat and went out. So these kind of people are there qua amt, because it is their job. Where you find people who are maybe systemic, then I can mention only a few. One is this eco-village environments, where there's people around intentional communities or transition town and all these, where they meet in their own pavilion. So that was the pavilion of the Organization of the Nations. And there is this Christian Wallster. He is, I think he was in Findhorn, he's with the Eco Village movement. There is Rob Wheeler, who was working with me, or I with him, or whatever, the last years or decades, out of I don't know exactly, close to Philadelphia, somewhere between New York and Washington. And there are certain other groups, indigenous people, indigenous groups, they have their own idea out of tradition, out of historic thinking, that things are connected in the deep. Or what I attended for a couple of days last week, so you see always in the morning, 6 to 8 or 9, when the work session starts, as a breakfast guy, or then coming in the evening or meeting up. These are the education people, and they, like the policy people, also try to look into deeper connections, in my view.
Can I just ask about how many women take part in these negotiations?
Heads of states of countries in the world, maybe 200, then it's maybe 2% or 3%. And some outstanding ladies like our Mrs. Merkel and a few other ladies. And the lady who is running this United Nations Climate Secretariat, her predecessor was also a lady. They're coming from South American countries. They have been sometimes state president before, but they are now head of UN organizations. So on the high level, it is 2, 3, 4%. Then doing the work, I think it is 60% women and 40% boys. And the whole team of one nation or one president or king, there is again very much as these are again roasters, first liners. I think they again have teams with 70, 80% male. But I'm not counting. This is not my business. I'm trying to be a...
Just get an idea.
What am I? I'm trying to be a door opener and a gate crasher. So sneaking in into closed meetings or something like that.
I wonder what kind of visions did they describe for the whole planet in the next, let's say, 10, 20, 30 years? Were there any typical visions which came up very much? Like sort of a visions of
I tried to go into another environment where the signal might be a little better. I was already in bed because I'm really dead tired. But what did you ask, Glenn?
Yeah, I was just wondering when they spoke about how the whole planet, the economy, the general system of the planet into the future, what kind of visions did they have for what they could see, where they wanted to go, so to say, in, let's say, 20 years or something like that? Was there any? Yeah, I just wonder if there were any typical ideas which came up a lot about how they saw the world in the future, the whole world.
Well, you see, this is a job description of a futurist, and we have this World Future Society, World Future Studies Federation. These are these guys who are doing models and scenarios and doing policy advice. But this is not on the level of these administrators who have to make binding agreements, and if they cannot implement something and promise something for the next meeting 1 year later, the whole design is broken. They are in slots, and not just disciplines. Now they have sub-commissions, and they try through climate to solve environment, development, health, security, justice, and whatever issues. That's why I work on this SDG recommendations with our Global Commons Alliance, where we have indigenous people involved and also all the other mindsets, because just saying, oh, we want love, peace, and harmony, everybody will agree, and they will write it in their documents, but they don't provide the means and the ends. And so there is not this big vision like we try to live it. I'm in an institute of paradise design where we try to do it really in harmony with nature and bottom up and creating healthy environments. But these are groups like intentional communities, which are eco-villages or acrosanti in America, where people were trying to find a new form of conviviality.
So are you saying they don't really speak about it at all? That most of the talk, they don't even talk about any vision for how the whole world works? in the future? Is that what you're saying?
Well, there are some pavilions where NGOs, institutions, alliances follow the task of their organization, their NGO. But how they work together is not prepared, as I just said. Some are educators, others are policymakers, others are system scientists, others looking into energy or health. And to bring that all together, that is what we tried in UN ECOSOC. When I first entered there in the early 90s, I saw that they split again in caucuses. So everybody has a piece of the pie and cannot talk to the other because they have different languages. We called it in system science the sectarianism of science. We, like in tribalization, make sure we are with our brothers or with our tribes and our disciplinary communities, because all the other words are not used and not understood, because the community can only be built when we agree in which context, in which mental models, certain words get a shared meaning. So it can be used and applied, but the variety is so big that this oversimplification also of all these systemic schools are not bridged.
Heiner, am I hearing that there isn't an overarching vision, like Glenn is suggesting, that is motivating the negotiations? Or where do these negotiators get their instructions from, you know, with regard to their respective governments or departments of state?
Well, there's so many bodies, G7, OECD, all these UN organizations. They assemble just for the climate negotiations. And so health or security or economic development are only in the sideline. And if you don't see what Willy Brandt wanted, at least to have a North-South commission, that people step back to solve a problem and see the big picture, they just focus more and more about less and less. So it was in the beginning environment and development, and now it's climate and development. They forgot the environment. And this is the same which happened with Mrs. Brundtland. She was a president of Norway. She did all this real work. She became the head of the WHO, and she said, through health, we can make the threads between the areas. And she failed totally, because other chieftains, other heads of other UN organizations, they say, this is mine. So eating and food is FAO, or climate is FMO, Meteorological Organization. So the original intention for a bigger picture and looking then into time, into challenges of humanity, we try to bring together with the Millennium Project, with Jerome Glenn in Washington. And I'm with him since '93, where we use all these challenges to humanity and try to see how to make wise connections between the challenges. And that is what the Club of Rome wanted in the 60s. And they said the problematic is growing, And they did it in the late 60s, this is 50 years ago. And so very little pragmatic insight leading to positive change.
So, what is your personal strategy through all this?
Well, I cannot give up. I try with youth and communication project, with cultural, vocational training and whatever, with filmmaking, with bringing different communities together, with wiser ways to do dialogue and communication, what I said in other Zoom meetings, multi-track diplomacy and peacemaking, to go into beyond the need to agree, to find solutions like a mother is doing with many children and many dilemmas. She tries to make an agreement that one child after the other is having the bike, and they're not fighting for bike. So I'm in this Cyprus negotiations, or I have been with our group in Future World Center in Nicosia, or in this United Nations Democracy Fund, where I'm trying to help as a tutor to bring young students or postgrads, always from different continents, to learn that there are new technologies and new means and ends, but only if they are based on old solutions, which are sometimes field proven and more effective, and that it is the need, well, what we are doing here, trying to share, care, dare, gift, be together, and go into being interested in the person and what this person is really meaning, not what you expect this person has said.
So thank you very much for giving us this little glimpse of what is happening at the top echelons. I would like to invite Doug now to come in because he's been sitting there. Hi, Doug.
I just had one idea.
Yeah.
You see, the joke after this controversial COP 2009 in Copenhagen was that all the Sherpas are on the Titanic, and the Titanic is hitting the iceberg, and the cable, we are sinking. And then the help rescue people don't help, but write back, what are you thinking about? You understand?
Yeah.
Thinking. And this was the same here, with all this opposition of the Americans leaving the Paris Accord, where every country signed except the US, that they say, make America great again. And then we say it here in the beer bars or wining places, let's make the planet great again, not the country. I think this mind shifting and this reality comes up. They learn that we don't have shared mental models. So it is, well, you see, I'm too frustrated to really give you the way out, and there is no panacea, but we have to talk. We are not living on one island anymore, and the change is dramatic and faster ever expected. and we go only to one thing which we can measure, like CO2. This is bullshit. Methane, when there is rapid climatic change, is much more dangerous. And this was discussed with Willy Brandt in '87 already. So science is knowing it, and others don't want to hear it. And others want to have a good term as a head of state, and very often don't look into other timescales. So anyway, I probably leave it with that and try to sleep. And we have
I want to thank you anyway. I mean, I see how frustrating it is, and yet it needs to be done. I mean, that somehow that, and the fact that you are continuing over these years to keep trying. So I just take my hat off to you that you can do that. And
me too, Anna.
and
Heiner.
yeah.
And I would go further. How can I help you, Heiner?
We did it already in the hot seat session. Let's think about it another time. I think we are already on a good way how we communicate, how Tammy is now doing her new media blog. I think this is getting more and more to quality communication, and teams which use tools which can be scaled up and have this, what nature has, this resilience and permeability to cross from one terrain to the other, and even to talk to aliens and enemies. Imagine, you see, you as America, your guys in the Pentagon, they make the Pentagon map, where they make a boundary. Here are the good countries and there are the failing states. This is a dualistic trap, and what you can help me with is looking into how to look into this Buddhistic, Taoistic, and whatever concepts and cultural patterns and belief systems which help us to really go beyond this Western dualistic, nominalistic, just counting and empiric bottom line education. And you see, I am very, very privileged. So you see, I now go up, a guest from is making a meal. I'm working now the last year with a professor from India doing comparative education studies to really see what are the deep vested richness and interests, and how we can find out, not through tolerance, but compassion. And that is actually these other things I'm doing: communication, cognition and compassion, how we do it in meditation groups to really find out that this mindfulness through taking in other positionalities, other perspectives, other frames, allows us to leave our silos and how we are educated in schools and academia.
This is nonviolent communication, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about.
Yes, sure.
And yeah, well, that's something that would be great to have in schools, in education, right at the beginning, yeah.
Look here. This is the face of Einstein and Tagore. And Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, was a fatherly friend of Gandhi and Einstein. And after getting the literary Nobel Prize, looked for his people, for schools and agriculture, and how we treat our soil and how we treat living things, then nothing is really good for the grandchildren and 7 generations. So we don't have the antennas, which I mentioned earlier. We confuse millions and billions and quarters with legislature periods and long view.
I think it's quite important, well, for me personally, not to make the celebrities or the heroes, it's more what they thought, what we can use, rather than the people. Because if you go into any of these people, they also have their downside, if you like, and that can be confusing. So I think it's better just to stick to the principles that we feel, rather than make heroes and celebrities out of certain particular people.
No, that is box thinking. That's definitely bad. You have to put values and trust into context. Or like the Eastern tradition, make a bridge between the infliction of suffering and the harnessing and supporting of happiness. So we humans, I think, are basically good. We are challenged, and we are not, especially our Western friends, Europe, America, we are talking more and more about holistic and everything, but we are not living. We are not walking the talk. So I was with a 22-year-old representative from a foundation in India. She could be my granddaughter. And she asked all these critical questions. The more we use holistic, systemic, resilience, all these words, the less we are living them. And so I think we have to really look into our values, how we educate our girls, which is still quite all right. But you see, it is single one-person families. It is not a family, it is not a tribe, it is not a village which is raising. And especially for the boys, that's why we do vocational training, it is so difficult. The education problems of young boys in our modern society. In traditional societies, they were brought up to be responsible and caring also for others. It is something like what is the word in English? Initiation, to be really aware that it's not only you, your one-eyed elbow nest. And there we see a big problem in our Western modes of education, that the boys are lost. They have much problem with negative body image and ways they confront this internationalization, the media, the wrong kind of food, and the drugs. So this is, I think, where we have to address as one of the root cause: women's rights, children's rights, the way how we treat health and living things. Anyway, I'm too tired to speak consistently, but I think I'm now getting a bite up there in 3 minutes, and I think I call it a day.
Thank you very much for your input.
I must.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, Doug, do you want to say something?
Well, at first, I Um, I take all of the. By the way, can you hear me? Because I have my usual rig. I'm in another room, a tablet.
Yeah, we can hear you, Doug.
Okay. I see this frustration for this.
It's breaking up a bit for me.
Yeah, Doug, your audio is not coming through hardly at all.
I'm looking up.
Breaking
Hello?
up a bit, yeah.
Huh. Well, I'll give it where it's at. So I hear Heiner with the sodium badly, and you see all of the existing power structures, the industrial failing, also collapsing under their own weight, and straight up is a dopamine for your body.
Doug, I'm still having trouble understanding you. Is anybody getting Doug clearly?
No.
Whether I can change.
Yeah, see, that's not coming through, Doug. You might be in a bad Wi-Fi spot in your room there.
He's using a different system from what he usually uses.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to switch to my usual system. I'll be back.
Thanks, Doug. I guess to be a little bit pokey, I was trying to get from Heiner whether his experience was one of a smart people problem or whether it's a version of a dumb people problem. And I say that very pointedly. And it's very dualistic. Yes, I understand that. Very Western dualistic.
You talked about smart people problem before a few times. And that would maybe be interesting to look at. If I understood you correctly, it had something to do with people who are engaged in many projects and ideas, and they sort of become overwhelmed, and it's a little difficult to focus the energy on something collaborative. Is that more or less what it's about?
Yes, you get the essence of it. But I don't think that in particular applies to Heiner's description of what happened in his
No.
Yeah, these are people who are there because of their titles, because of their positions, asked to do something very simplistic, not really looking at big pictures other than this example, that he gave. So that's why I was trying to figure out whether this is a smart people problem or a dumb people problem, just to put it very pointedly.
I have to say, it's actually, for me, it's shocking that it's even possible to organize such a conference without having a bigger vision of the world that everyone unites around.
It's no shock to me because we have governments and leaders now who don't believe in science, who actually deny science. Hey, Doug. You're on mute, Doug.
Is that better?
Yes, it's much better. Much better.
Sorry, no intention to frustrate.
No, we just want to hear what you have to say, Doug.
I was listening to Heiner and his shared frustration with sort of the general dystopia of our world, and my feeling my feeling is that, you know, the existing power structures and approaches to things which come out of that reductionist, you know, dualist, industrial power-centered, scarcity-centered paradigm, sort of cultural paradigm and imprint is breaking down. It's failing. Government's failing. Financial systems are failing. I mean, there was this post that I shared about, you know, one of the European countries officially hitting bankrupt on their balance sheet, and a couple of others due to follow within the week or two. And, you know, it's this whole sort of illusory order is breaking down, and it keeps sort of perpetrating the same dance, sort of like doing the same thing and expecting a different result, and that ain't happening. But it keeps going through the same forms and motions for approaching all this stuff. And I can't help but believe that if we don't do it really differently, we're not going to figure out how to get to the promised land. And I, on a gut level, I place far more stock and trade and belief in the human beings of our planet than the institutions of our planet. And so my orientation and focus, and it's not that I judge or disrespect all of the sort of human ergs being invested and efforts being invested. Heiner exemplifying a person who's, you know, swimming as hard as he can to get upstream and staying in one place or being pushed back downstream for decades. I appreciate all of those people and all of their efforts. My orientation is to the how do we do it differently, and it's much more directed toward starting from a clean slate and from a frame of reference of human beings as generators, as sources of an action, and the human experiential reality and truth of that in the moment, meaning like here and now and today. What am I contributing, and how am I contributing, and am I sort of maximizing my generative value as a contributor to the greater whole, and getting together and working and playing with others, or as part of a we, as part of a collective? Are we contributing? Are we doing something different? Are we bringing something different to the party that might inform or change or shift or help us get around all of that legacy stuff, which really seems to stand between us and where we want to get to? And I don't relate to the existing structures and the existing efforts and approaches as something to be oppositional to. It's not like we have to overcome them or be antagonistic to them. I also don't look at them as necessarily the things that need to be transformed in order for us to get to transforming our world, right? You know, in the midst of the US right now, there's this whole tax thing going on, which is insane. And there have been these handful of voices that have said, you know, you keep talking about wanting to help the middle class. Well, what if you gave the tax breaks to the middle class? Like, what if you gave it to them directly so that all these people have more money to spend in the economy and to lift everybody's boat, right? And it's like, no, we want to help the middle class, but we're going to give all the money to the rich and let it trickle down. It's like this indirect, oblique construct and rationalization. It's bizarre. It's just bizarre. And I see like us doing that globally. So, you know, I believe in these conversations on a micro level, us learning how to communicate and share and and collectively develop a sort of singular metacognitive vision for what's to be and how to do it differently. And that's on sort of the micro and the personal and the experiential level. And on a macro level, I think there are thousands of these conversations going on with like-minded people that are all struggling to get to clean air about how to approach all this stuff, and are rhizomatically connecting with those and figuring out how to aggregate them, not homogenize them, which is the industrial habit, right? Dark arts, like let's make them all the same. No, it's about rhizomatically connecting with all of them and allowing the aggregate energy and generative potential of all of them to manifest the new as an emergent thing, not as a driven or directed or imposed thing, but something that comes out of the collective human generative experience, intention, will, and desire. And that's all, underlying all that is values. You know, I believe we get to consensus on values, and so I'm going to get very rubber meets the road. So in trying to figure out how to awaken and enfranchise, empower, enable, connect people on a grassroots level globally, the first step is making sure everybody has the ability to express a voice, like that they're connected, they're part of the conversation. The second thing is to find a thing, something, one thing that is a universal to all human experience that taps their core human beingness as a reactive, responsive feeling. And there are only two things where that happens. It happens in fun, in games, and it happens in the arts. That, you know, globally, transcendent of culture, transcendent of language, transcendent of everything, play is play, joy is joy, emotional response to art in one form, way, shape, form, or another are universal experiential common denominators that enable all of us to react the same and see in each other shared humanity. So I think, you know, if you could get everybody a voice so that they're connected, they're part of the network. The second thing is, like, what's the one thing where you literally could get everybody on the planet to play at the same time? It's sort of like, you know, ping pong opening up China for the US. It's like, if you look historically back through time, some of the most insanely powerful, like, transcendent diplomatic initiatives were based on sporting events, which is play. A little bit industrial for my flavor, but it's play. You know, this all goes into I think we got to try something different. And the answers lie in these areas rather than in, you know, progressively more and more complicated rationalizations, analyses, languaging structures, frameworks, paradigms, and programs, and
theses,
I just get tired.
Contracts, legal structures.
It's like, and yeah, so that's sort of me.
Well, with what I'm hearing, I'm just gonna try to sum it up or make sense of it. When you said that old structures are failing, the impression is that the old structures is a way of doing things. It's a way of thinking, of seeing the world, and systems, action patterns of action, and that they haven't worked very well, and it's a general consensus, probably among most people, that it doesn't work very well. And one manifestation of that, perhaps, is the media, which is quite negative. Hello there. Hi, Tammy. Like in the news media, there's very many negative stories, and that also gives this impression of dystopia. At the same time, there's many people who want change, similar to us, and who want to have a holistic model to do things in practice according to a holistic model. Now, the typical criticism that these groups often get is that that's a fine idea, but you can't do it in practice, or it's not developed